going to think of IRT as a lens for psychological assessment. And to continue with the metaphor of IRT as a lens, it's as if we're looking at a person's responses through a high-powered microscope. We're not just seeing whether they've answered a question right or wrong, but we're also getting insight into how their underlying traits influence their responses. And as you recall, there are different models in IRT. They're just different types of lenses. They're the models within IRT, which is 1PL, 2PL, and 3PL. Each of these models offers a different level of resolution or detail. The 1PL model, remember it's the Roche model, only uses one parameter, and that's the B parameter. This parameter tells us about item difficulty, and it serves as a valuable tool for understanding how challenging each item is. The 2PL and 3PL models, on the other hand, add in additional parameters, where the A parameter measures how well an item discriminates between individuals with different levels of that underlying trait, and the C parameter gives us insight into the likelihood of a person guessing the correct answer. Each additional parameter helps us refine our understanding of the test items and the individual's interaction with them. This will be the subject of another video. To truly grasp the B parameter significance, let's delve into it further. Think of the B parameter as a measure of an item's difficulty, just like the height in a hurdle of a race. If the hurdle is low, that would be a low B value. It's easier for a greater number of racers, or in our case, respondents, to get over it. For example, an item like I feel sad on a depression severity test might have a low B value because even individuals with mild levels of depression are likely to agree with it. However, if the hurdle is high, which would be a high B value, only the most skilled racers, or those with high levels of the trait being measured, are likely to get over it without stumbling. Now, a more intense item, such as I feel life is not worth living, would probably have a high B value, indicating that it's a difficult question that only individuals with severe depression are likely to endorse. The B parameter gives us a crucial reference point. It reveals the level of the trait at which a respondent has a 50% chance of endorsing the item. It's like knowing the exact height at which that racer has a 50-50 shot of clearing the hurdle. Difficult items are located to the right or to the higher end of the ability scale, theta, where easier items are located to the left or the lower end of the ability scale. The typical values of the item difficulty range from -3 to 3. Items whose B values are near -3 will correspond to items that are very easy, while items with values near +3 will correspond to the items that are very difficult for the examinees. You can interpret the B parameters as sort of a Z-score for the item. If the value is -1, that means it's appropriate for people taking this questionnaire at a score of -1, or like a 15th percentile. To understand how classical test theory and item response theory differ, we have to examine the unique methods they each utilize to measure item difficulty. In CTT, item difficulty is assessed using the proportion of individuals or patients that respond correctly to a particular item, and this is often referred to as the p-value. This p-value represents the proportion of correct responses, or in the case of a scale or inventory, the proportion of individuals that endorse the item. For example, consider a scale item probing a symptom of depression like, I feel sad most of the time. If a high proportion of individuals agree with this statement, meaning they're experiencing this symptom, then the p-value will be high. And that signifies that the item is easy, or that the symptom is commonly experienced. Conversely, if fewer individuals agree with the statement, the p-value will be low. And that indicates that the item is hard, or that the symptom is less frequently experienced. This p-value, or what's known as item facility in classical test theory, is a direct measure of item's easiness. However, this approach has its limitations. It doesn't consider the severity of symptoms in the individuals who are responding, which is crucial for achieving an accurate measure of item difficulty, and this is where IRT comes into play. IRT measures item difficulty with the B parameter, and this approach is fundamentally different. The B parameter does not rely on the proportion of individuals who endorse an item. Instead, it estimates the difficulty level at which an individual with a certain severity of symptoms, or the level of the underlying psychological trait that's being measured, has a 50% probability of endorsing an item. In IRT, a high B value signifies a hard item, whereas a low B value indicates an easy item. This is the exact inverse of classical test theory. Therefore, when transitioning from classical test theory to item response theory, one of the most significant cognitive shifts for you as a student is to reorient your understanding of what is item difficulty. Moreover, the B parameter allows for a more nuanced understanding of of item difficulty. It provides insight into the specific trait level at which an individual is likely to endorse an item. This is in contrast to classical test theory, where difficulty is based solely on the proportion of individuals that endorse an item without considering the trait level of these individuals. And to quickly summarize, the pivotal distinction between CTT and IRT in the field of psych lies in the method for evaluating item difficulty. Now, while CTT uses the p-value to reflect item facility, IRT employs the B parameter to estimate item difficulty at a specific trait level. This contrasting approach requires you to shift your understanding of item difficulty when moving from CTT to IRT. To provide a more comprehensive understanding, let's delve deeper into these examples and apply them in the field of clinical psych, and then reframe them for forensic psych and neuropsych. So in the realm of clinical psychology, IRT, and specifically the B parameter, we use these as tools as a clinician. We're often tasked with diagnosing, assessing, and treating mental health conditions such as depression, which can greatly vary in severity and presentation among individuals. The B parameter allows us to gauge the difficulty level of each item on a depression scale, which helps us understand at what severity level a person is likely to endorse that item. Let's look at our items D, E, and F with their respective B values of negative 0.5, 0.0, and 1.0. Item D here would represent the statement, I feel a bit down. This item's lower B value of negative 0.5 signifies that it's relatively easier to endorse and thus may be affirmatively responded to even by individuals with mild depression. Then we have item E, which here it's, I feel hopeless about the future. With a B value of 0, this item is of moderate difficulty. Hence, it might be endorsed by individuals who fall in the mid-range of depression severity. Item F, which is, I feel life is not worth living. The highest B value of 1.0 corresponds to this item, indicating it is quite difficult to endorse. And that's because it's expected to be affirmed primarily by individuals with severe depression, which would imply a higher level of distress. The different B values align with our clinical intuition and our experience. The more severe the depression, the more likely the individual is to endorse intense items. Now let's take these concepts and apply them to forensic psych. Suppose we're dealing with a scale that assesses a defendant's propensity for violent behavior. Let's reframe items D, E, and F here. Now item D would be, I have often found myself in arguments. With the B value of negative 0.5, this item's relatively easy to endorse, possibly indicating a mild tendency for confrontational behavior. Item E, I have gotten into physical fights before. With a B value of 0.0, this item is moderate in difficulty and is likely to be endorsed by defendants with a moderate history of violent behavior. Then we have item F, which is, I have seriously injured someone out of anger. This item's high B value of 1.0 suggests it is quite difficult to endorse, and it might be affirmed by defendants with a severe history of violence, and that's indicative of a serious risk. Finally, let's consider a neuropsychological context where we might be assessing cognitive impairment. We'll reframe once again items D, E, and F. Here, item D, I occasionally forget where I put my keys. With a B value of negative 0.5, this item is relatively easy to endorse, and it's likely affirmable by individuals with minor memory issues. Item E, I have trouble remembering recent conversations. This item's B value of 0.0 indicates a moderate difficulty, likely to be endorsed by individuals experiencing more significant memory problems. Then we have item F, which could be, I don't recognize family members. With a high B value of 1.0, this item is hard to endorse and might be agreed upon by individuals experiencing severe memory loss or cognitive impairment, such as those with advanced dementia. Now, as we explore through different psychological subfields, the difficulty of the B parameter in IRT becomes apparent. And by providing a nuanced understanding of test items and how individuals interact with them, IRT, and especially the B parameter, greatly enhances the interpretability and clinical utility of psychological assessments. And in more technical terms, this is a hard item with a probability of correctly responding examinees being low along a majority of the ability scale. And if you look closely, it's only increasing at the higher ability levels. So in essence, the B parameter in IRT gives us a way to understand how hard or easy it is for someone to endorse an item depending on their level of the trait being measured. And I want to end with this graph that comes from an article called the IRT Item Difficulty Parameter by Laila Issayeva, and it's a great knowledge check. Look at the 5 IRFs below and check whether you're able to compare the items in terms of their difficulty. And then let's look at the questions. Which item here is the hardest, requiring the highest ability level on average to get it correct? And if you see, it's the blue, the number 5, as it's furthest to the right. Now, which item would be easiest? It's the dark blue, which is number 1, and that's the furthest to the left. I hope this lecture has clarified the role of the B parameter in IRT and how it's used to assess item difficulty.